Now, you might have seen the slogan behind me, but the Innovation Factory is a place to develop your dreams. Now, the dreams that you have today might be very different to the dreams that you had 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and 5 years ago. I know it's the case for me. But raise your hand if your dreams, some of those things that are important to you, raise your hand if they've changed over the years. Raise your hand if that's something you would agree with. And one of the things that's really great about a place like this, the Innovation Factory, is that there are people being brought together. They can share the sorts of things, proudly in terms of what they're working on. They have business ideas. You can get feedback, validation, advice. The depth and breadth of expertise that is in this room is ridiculous. Now, I've been asked to share a little bit about myself. So normally at this time, I'd sort of talk a bit about my business and the background. But if it's okay with you, I wanted to share a more personal kind of story at an event like this. If I make it really quick, is that okay? Yes or no? Yeah? Okay, cool. Now, before I start the story, I'd like to ask you a question. Has there ever been a moment when you've looked back on something that you did and kind of like how you behaved, and you thought to yourself, oh, I really could have done a better job than that? Is that something that's happened to everybody in the room? And I'm not going to ask you to share, but I'm looking by the nods that, that's something that you've been in a position with as well. So this story actually goes back about 20 years ago. I was a teenager. No, I wasn't. But if you were there on this particular day, you would have been standing in my mum's kitchen at Jasmine Avenue in Marion. And I'll give you some context. My husband and I were very, very young parents. We had our first daughter at 17. And some of you might know what it's kind of like then when you've got young kids. You don't have that much money. There's more money going out than money coming in. But, he's a loving guy. He supports me massively. So every now and again I get a little gift, maybe a bunch of flowers, maybe dinner out, some sort of surprise. It would be a few $100s though, at the most. And on this particular day, he brought me home a necklace. So I opened up the box, I'm like, oh, this is like amazing. Turns out he did a plumbing job for somebody that gave him a good deal, like a really good deal on this necklace. It was big and it was chunky, and I thought, I think it's gold plated, it's probably copper, will it turn my neck green? But anyway, I guess it really is the thought that counts. But I would have liked something much smaller and more dainty and real gold. And I knew it wasn't going to be real gold because just at the time there was no way that he could afford something like that. And if you know me, you know that I try and hold my face very diplomatic and tactful, but sometimes I just cannot. So he knew that I wasn't massively impressed with this gift because it was all over my face. And I was like, oh, that's lovely, but I'm not sure if it's for me, not sure if this is something that suits. And I think what maybe added to that was there was a family member there at the time, and they were talking about jewellery, and they're like, oh, you don't want anything too heavy. It's going to make your neck look older, like it looks a bit, flashy, whatever. You don't want to draw attention to your neck. So Scott rang up the guy that he was working for at the time, and the guy said, no worries, we'll change it for whatever she wants. If she wants something different, no problems. Now, let's jump forward. The Thursday night. Back in the day, what did you do on Thursday night? You went late night shopping. So we're walking into Shiels Jewellers at Marion, and my husband has explained to the store manager, who was actually expecting us, that we'd like to exchange this necklace for maybe something else. The store manager was amazing. She said, you can exchange that necklace for whatever you'd like, up to the same value in the store. And I didn't know the value. But I said, what's the value? And Scott says, no, he just grabbed the box away and said, why don't you just, find a necklace that you like and we'll see if it might be covered. Now, this is not really the way that I'd like to proceed because I like to know evidence and information and how much things cost. But I didn't really have much of a choice. So the next minute we're across, the glass cabinets from the store manager. We start in the $200 section. And, you know, as you move to the left, they kind of like go up in value. I'm like, oh, what about this one? And she says, you can have quite a few of those, as many as you want. So I moved to the something less dainty, delicate, still real gold. What about this one? She's like, if you want this, you can have it. What else would you like to go with that? And this kept going until we were in the section where things were over, you know, quite a few $1,000s. And this is like 90s, this is significant kind of investment. I think the manager looked back at me and she's like, she's crazy. Like, what is she even thinking? You're ungrateful, whatever else. But she didn't say anything, she's massively professional. We moved to the left just a little bit more and we were at some of the most expensive necklaces in the store. I'm embarrassed to ask if I could have that one, so I say, oh, that one looks quite nice, I quite like that. And you can understand, like, dainty, delicate, no, that's all gone by now. And the salesperson, the store manager said to me, Wendy, that is the exact necklace that you have. And I'm like, but why is it so much? And she's like, because it's real gold. And I'm like, oh, I just might take a moment or two to have a think about whether or not I want to change it. And she said to me, look, if somebody bought me a necklace like that, I would be so grateful and I would never take it off. Now, she was incredibly professional and polite, but I'm sure that she was not feeling a connection with me at the time. But it does turn out that we do have something in common because, funnily enough, if somebody bought me a necklace like that, I would be grateful and I would never, ever take it off. In fact, it's been 20 odd years and you probably could count the days on, you know, one hand that it's been off my neck. And you might be thinking, okay, this is great, but we're at a business event, what's the takeaway? And how does this kind of relate? So firstly, validation is absolutely key. You see, I've got a role as the entrepreneurship facilitator. People talk to me all the time. Like, I've probably heard any and every business idea almost under the sun. And sometimes I hear that kind of mantra, you know, it's okay to fail, like fail fast, when I'm coaching people one-on-one, or maybe running events or doing tours, workshops, webinars, and promoting entrepreneurship across the community. It is okay to fail for sure, but failing can be horrible. So if you get the validation, you are far less likely to fail. And places like this, like the Innovation Factory, they allow startups to come in, to set up at a hot desk, to not have massively expensive fit-outs or sign super long leases, and to get some really fantastic validation around what it is that you are doing. The other thing that I want to reflect upon is who I was taking advice from at the time. So if I was to stick with the advice that you don't want anything too big or too chunky, I would have missed out on something that's brought a lot of, joy and I've enjoyed for such a long time. But then again, taking advice from the store manager was the best thing I could have done. So if you think about this, if validation is not coming from a valid source, then it is invalid. And there's one more takeaway, which I know there's a lot of demonstration of this kind of value in a community like this. And it is to always be kind to people. Now, the guy that organised that necklace, well, he did do my husband a pretty good deal. He had a big impact on our lives. And you'll probably guess that there's lots of other lessons that I learnt from that whole experience. And he will probably never know the kind of big impact that he had, but he might know now. Now I'm going to ask Albert and Toby to join me up on stage, and whilst they're doing that, I'll just read out their bios. So Albert Bensimon was born in Cairo, Egypt, and he's of French Jewish descent. In 1969, Albert married, and he and his wife, Nara, took off on a working holiday to Europe. They travelled on a motorbike for a year, and then they decided to come home via Canada. They intended, to work for a month in Canada. That ended up being 7 years. And in 1977, after extensive work experience in marketing studies, they decided to return home to Australia. Albert thought that he'd put his newly acquired marketing skills to the test, and we've seen lots of that over the years too, and his hobby, which was making jewellery, and he decided to open a jewellery store. Now, as luck would have it, the recently widowed Mrs. Shiels of Shiels Jewellers had decided to sell their store. Albert bought it and he employed her for several years. The business has since grown into a national organisation and is one of the largest jewellery chain operations in the country. Now, I checked out your YouTube channel, Albert, and I also saw that you liked conducting the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, and you've got a bit of an interest in the arts as well. And maybe you can tell us about your motto in a moment too. Now, I guess you would understand, if you don't already, that these guys are father and son. So Toby Bensimon is the Managing Director of Shiels Jewellers, taking up the position in 2013. Shiels Jewellers is one of the leading online jewellery retailers in Australia, and Toby has guided the business through the recent retail downturn and has ensured that the company continued to grow during this period of digital disruption. He is also the co-founder of Podpack, Australia's largest manufacturer of coffee capsules, and he's the co-founder of the Innovation Factory, Bureau Booths, Voya Tiles, Brimful, and the soon-to-be launched Task Pod businesses. Now let's give these guys a massive round of applause. So what we'll do here is I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but I'm hoping that you'll have a question or two that you might like to ask as well. Now, there's a question going begging that might be, how are the two of you connected to the Innovation Factory? Kind of like, why are you here? So who would like to take that one first?
Well, during coronavirus, we saw our business like an aeroplane, Rex heading towards a building, heading towards a mountain, about to crash. As coronavirus kicked in, we thought we were going out of business. So I don't know who started it. I don't know if it was you or me. One of us started this whiskey over Zoom and come up with some new business ideas so that we could keep our staff employed. And Zach and a few familiar faces here were on those calls. And it started a whole heap of business ideas. And we thought that this building would be a great space to start the business. And Dad owns this building, and it used to be our advertising agency who occupied it. But they left the building, and we turned it into the Innovation Factory. And Tyson, who's here as well, who's the CEO of Bureau Booths, is a shareholder in the new business as well. And we use it as an incubator and a launch pad for good ideas, because you always run out of good ideas, don't you? And that's the genesis of Innovation Factory.
Very good. Now, you are father and son, so Albert, you might want to take this one. How is it that you work together? What different roles do the two of you play?
First of all, we work together with great difficulty. It's always hard to work with your son. He's, I've already done this, I know how to do that. And of course, it takes a while. It took a while for me to have the confidence that I needed to hand over all my diamonds and jewellery, right? And say, right, you take care of them. It does, and also there's a certain amount of friction because of father and son. If I'm talking to an employee, there's certain things I will not say. I won't say. Whereas when you're talking to your son, oh, don't be bloody stupid. Well, I wouldn't say that to an employee, right? So you take liberties with your own father or son, and it creates some problems. But we've gotten over it, and we've got our little paths, and I do what I do best, and he does what he does best, and it's working quite well at the moment.
It took about 3 years,
right.
And that was about 10 years ago, so we're good now. Now we just have fun and find each other quite amusing, where before we used to piss each other off.
True.
I can appreciate what, weekends and, family get-togethers and things like that must be like. You'll have to probably have some rules around what you discuss.
More champagne.
More champagne,
and wine.
Sounds good. Now, Albert, you've had some amazing creative advertising campaigns over the years. Like, this is showing our age. But who remembers a Simply Irresistible campaign that was, unbelievable? So I wondered, that campaign, but other campaigns, how did you come up with those ideas, particularly back then, and then execute them so well?
As I was about to say, with Rex and with the problems that Ansett had, Shiels had these problems too. We were up and down like a yo-yo, and one of the real downturns where the company was on the verge of going broke. I was in Sydney with my wife, and I read a book by Hugh Mackay, and then I was thinking about the other guy that had the Remington shaver, and he said, I liked the shaver so much I bought the company. And it sort of resonated with me, and I thought, I wonder if I should do my own ads and if that would work, because there's a lot of bullshit in in jewelry in particular. So I thought, can't say bullshit, so I'll say hoo-ha. And from that book, there was a word called brouhaha, and I thought brouhaha turned into hoo-ha. Came back to my advertising agent and I said, look, why don't you properly interview me or see if I can actually do the job. And he did, and he thought we could, and the sales were rock bottom. As soon as I hit the TV with the no hoo-ha ads, sales just skyrocketed. They went, it hit the nerve. And a lot of the ads that you think are very creative, and he's ride on motorcycle, pick me, and out of chocolates, and I don't know if you can remember jumping out of airplanes and stuff. Most of those ideas came out of the front bar of the Exeter. They didn't come out of this innovation factory. People would say to me, "Hey Albert, why don't you ride a red motorbike and say, oh, pick me." I'd say, that's a bit stupid. Come in here, talk to the guy, and say, yeah, I think we should do it. So you'd be surprised where good ideas come from. And everybody has a marketing skill. Everybody in this room is a marketer. Everyone.
Sounds like wine or champagne might be a bit of a theme, though. So I just wondered if you could talk a bit about the role that innovation plays in your organisation. And that's probably in the context of the fact that some people might think that retail and jewellery, is an area that's been really sort of hit hard and had massive changes. So how does that sort of play out for you guys?
Yeah, it has. I mean, during Corona, jewelry is very specific in that it's tiny. And so doing product development is really a face-to-face thing. So you work with your overseas jewelers, you work with your design team, and they need to be face-to-face in order to actually work through designing tiny little incremental changes to the product, making a tiny bit lighter, a tiny bit heavier, a little bit of a slightly better quality diamond. And so doing that over Zoom has proven to be extremely challenging. And we've found that we're probably doing about 200 pieces of innovation every week. We've had to really ramp that up because we're doing it over Zoom. So our supply chain over, say, a supplier in Italy is, instead of sending us or coming over with 50 products, working through the detail, changing them and modifying them, they're having to send us 500 products, and we're still choosing only 20 of those. So it's a lot more wasteful, a lot more time consuming, but we've all adapted to it, and our buyers and our design team are actually, they've really picked up the slack. But we can't wait for the borders to open and everyone get your vaccination.
But at Shiels, we've always been innovative, and it's interesting one day I was buying diamonds, and they had cognac diamonds, and cognac diamonds, these are only $200 a carat. These white ones are $800 a carat. I said, well, why don't people buy the cognac diamonds? They're Australian. And they said, because people don't like brown, because De Beers has been advertising that white is the only colour that you should buy. Your diamond should be white. If it's not white, forget it. So I thought, I'm going to change that. And we started selling cognac diamonds, and we started in Western Australia because that's where they came from, and the response was phenomenal. And to this day, we sell a hell of a lot of cognac diamonds, and they're beautiful. They're Australian, they're beautiful, lovely colour. So we always have the courage to do something that somebody else won't do. And now maybe Toby can talk to you about the courage that we've taken now with lab-grown diamonds, where we're told, if you have a lab-grown diamond, a real diamond, you'll lose all your clients because they won't know which is lab, which is this. You've got a huge risk if you shouldn't do it. And maybe Toby can talk about that.
I don't need to say much more other than, hands up in the room, who would wear a lab-grown diamond? Yeah, it's surprising. I mean, my wife, given the choice between an above-ground diamond or a below-ground diamond, she'll choose, she likes the lab better. So it's really like a space where we knew we could see, like, over the horizon there was big opportunity. We've doubled down on it, invested heavily, and it's starting to pay off because customers actually prefer them, which is very, very strange. And I think our industry, we're all dinosaurs. We all move so slowly. If you have a tiny little competitive advantage or edge, you can really do well.
Just shows you that being in Adelaide, because it's a smaller town, smaller city, doesn't really matter, because we were the first to actually sell lab-grown diamonds in Australia. No other jeweler, no other traditional jeweler would do it. And they could see our sales, and straight away some of them started to copy us. So many of the innovations that we've had in the jewellery business here have been adopted interstate. So we do give birth to a lot of ideas in Adelaide. You'd be quite surprised. This room is full of people that have got great ideas, and the ideas don't necessarily have to come out of New York, Paris or Sydney. They can come right out of here, Adelaide.
Excellent, thanks guys. Now, who would like to ask Albert and Toby a question? Pop your hand up and Pete will bring a mic to you. We need a minute or two to have a think about it. But guys, you've got some various interests outside of Shiels and Graham Jewelers. Like, how do you manage all those different things? I think you might be doing some investing, for example. You're in different industry sectors. So how do you manage all those diverse kind of interests?
Me? Well, I went into property development because I just want to get away from him. No, he was running the business and I thought I'll do something else. And this actually was one of the innovations. When we took the ceiling out of this building, they said, oh, you're crazy, no one will rent it. And if they do, no one else will come back in because you need a ceiling, you know. No ceiling, no sale. Well, no ceiling, and believe me, this place has never been empty. So, it's, you know, you can be innovative. And I'm innovative in terms of what I've done in the development. I've developed a lot of property near Chinatown, and every property that I've developed, I've done it with the same idea as jewellery. Do it differently. Doesn't look like the property next door. Doesn't have to have a door the way that they have. Doesn't have to face the way they do. So each one is different. So you might look at the building that I've done on Field Street. There's a building there, you can have a look. So all the basically development. So it takes me away from him, so we don't have any arguments.
You act like we don't work well together.
No, we do work well together.
Toby, what about you and your interests?
My goal in life is to do nothing. And my brother-in-law, actually, whenever I talk to him on the phone, it's like, what are we going to do today? Nothing. But it never ends up being that way. But the way you get to that goal is you you work with really, really brilliant people. And if you work with someone who's really brilliant, then you actually don't have to do the things that they're really good at. And so, you know, with Bureau Booths, for example, Tyson's running that and is an incredible guy. I work with Zach as well. I know that when he's got a project that, we're working on, I don't really have to micromanage him. So I think, it's very easy to manage multiple projects if you're working with brilliant people.
Excellent. Now, is there a question from the audience at all? Yes, Michelle. So Pete, I think you know Michelle, don't you?
Thank you. Thank you guys for sharing your story. I'm interested, obviously you've had a lot of change over the last number of years with obviously online shopping coming really big. Running a retail store with all of those different things that happened in the pandemic last year, I'm really interested in how you've supported your people at your different stores, your head office, all of those things, transitioning through those different processes and the impact that it's had on you guys as well as your people.
It's been a crazy ride. So when we saw the business really tanking at the beginning of coronavirus, it was very, very scary. And we scrambled to try and find other things to do. But it worked out that very, very quickly we were back open. And in fact, in Perth, we didn't close at all. So our staff, our managers over there were on Zoom calls every morning with all the managers across the country. And they were saying, it's not as bad as you think, just open your doors. So it was us, Chemist Warehouse and Coles and Woolworths were the only retailers in the whole of, in Perth who were actually open. And we ended up doing really well. And they encouraged our other managers to open the store. And then in the meantime, our web sales quadrupled. And so we had to really scale up. And in fact, I don't have an office anymore. There's 4 people in my office because we've run out of space. So we're currently in the process of expanding our office. But it really, coronavirus has been a real eye-opener for us, which is if you back yourself and you have optimism, then you'll do well. Whereas a lot of our competitors stayed shut and their customers were like, where were you when we needed you? When we needed you to actually provide, jewelry might seem like it's a luxury, but people need to get engaged. They need to, purchase anything for a special occasion. It's not necessarily just a luxury.
I think I'll add to that. We had a board meeting just prior to the coronavirus coming up, and I looked at the figures and I said, we're spending far too much on Google and the advertising on Google and Facebook and all. I said it's just out of proportion. Plus I don't know if you know, but you buy bandwidth to go, like we're hosted by Amazon, you buy bandwidth. Well, bandwidth doesn't go from $5,000 a month to 6 or 7. It goes from 5, 20. That's the jump. So you have to make the jump. Well, he went to 20 and I said, you're nuts. I said, you're crazy, you're spending too much. And of course, when the coronavirus hit, we were relying on our website. We were 100% ready. So thanks to a discussion and a heated discussion, I might add, saying that we're spending too much, we ended up being ahead of the game. Where everyone else was scrambling, they couldn't keep up with their sales, and their websites were constantly breaking down because they don't have the bandwidth, and also the stock. We didn't stop purchasing. We had orders on the water, and we thought, no, we're not going to stop buying them. And orders that were being made in Australia, we didn't cancel any orders, which was really dangerous because it could have got to a stage where we couldn't pay the suppliers. But we ended up being stocked, but really correctly stocked.
Excellent. Now we do need to wrap it up because we're going to have some more networking and drinks. But have either of you two fellows got anything else that you would like to kind of add as like a key takeaway message from tonight?
Yes, the takeaway message is that necklet that you're wearing has never been out of fashion and has gone up in value dramatically. And I didn't know the story before she mentioned it tonight. But so my takeaway message is buy gold.
Thank you. Toby, anything that you wanted to say?
I suppose optimism to your question before about, back yourself. I think that if you see storm clouds, maybe don't necessarily look for the rain coming. There's going to be sunshine afterwards, and I think back yourself.
Yeah. Let's give these guys a massive round of applause. Thank you so much.